So, hi everyone. This talk is from 5.12 to 5.24, upgrading a business application. My name is Lukas Mai. You may also know me as Mauke from IRC or CPAN. And I work at a German company called Jochen Schweizer in Munich. And we have a pretty vital Perl application that does all kinds of things. And well, you see here some things. It sends email. It's a web application. Yeah, it does not everything, but very much does a lot. And all of it is running on Perl 5.12. So I thought about, well, maybe we should upgrade that because there are newer versions out. And some stats on that. We have in our repository about 1,600 PM files of our own, not lines of code, just files. That doesn't mean we reinvent everything. We also have about 6,700 CPAN dependencies. These are also just the module files. These are fully complete recursive dependencies, and every single little helper module is counted in there. And fortunately, we also have 2,600 test files. Otherwise, this would be much scarier. Some of the CPAN dependencies are Catalyst for our web framework part, and we use Moose extensively. Almost every single module uses Moose. But we also have some other stuff in there, which I'm not going to go into. And as for tools, every developer has their own sandbox, virtual machine. And so we can take a snapshot, experiment, and if it doesn't work out, just roll back. So no harm done. We use Perl Brew, not the system Perl, which also makes it easy to just get a new Perl and use that. And we use Carton to manage the CPAN dependencies. So I thought, yeah, why not just do that? Pull down a new Perl, get a fresh checkout, install the CPAN dependencies, run the tests, and see what happens. Yeah, what could go wrong? Immediately, this step, installing the CPAN dependencies, failed, and I'm not going to go into that because I don't think I have the time. I'm going to skip that, and at the end, if I still have time left over, I'm going to go back to these slides. But most of these were fixed by just bumping the minimum required version, and the rest, I rewrote some code to just get rid of some dependencies. Coming to the issues in our own code, which is fun. So I'm not going to mention which exact Perl version introduced each change. I'm just going to compare 5.12 and 5.24. So in 5.24, the stringification of regex objects changed because some new regex flags got added, and it would have been unwieldy to include the complete list like X, I, S, M and stuff. So instead, it just has a set to default hat thing. And that actually broke one of our module and two tests that relied on the exact stringification, but that was relatively easy to fix. Then we had strict inc checks. This kind of error message, can't locate foo PM, then some directory, permission denied. Perl used to just try to open the required module in each inc directory, and if it doesn't work, just go to the next one. But nowadays, it looks at the reason for the error, and if it's file not found, then it skips it, as before. But if it's permission denied, then it dies right there. And we had some code that unconditionally added some directories to inc, even though it didn't, the user running the application didn't have permissions to read the directory. This was harmless. The module wasn't in there. This thing wasn't used. So the simple workaround was just to add a grep -d, which also filters out any directory you don't have read permissions for because the stat fails. So that affected two modules. Also pretty easy. Then this fun bit, syntax error. The parsing code got cleaned up, and now you actually have to use parentheses around the QW part, which somehow got into one test file and then got copy-pasted into 3 other tests. Smartwatch is experimental. This one only affected one module, fortunately, because 1 or 2 years ago, I realized we had given when and Smartwatch in our code, and I had already started getting rid of that and rewriting code. So only one case was left, and that was also pretty easy to fix. We mostly used strings, undef, regex objects, and only one caller passing in an array of strings, which is trivial to convert to a regex in this case. So yeah, we got lucky there. Unescaped braces in regexes. Also pretty easy, you get this warning, just add some backslashes. That got 2 of our modules. I think that was actually private copies of datetime, which we had to have some private patches for. But yeah, trivial to fix, just a bit annoying. This one is more interesting, redundant argument in sprintf, because sprintf has started warning about arguments that are not used in the format string. And we had some ad hoc kind of templating code in there. There were some configuration things, and in most cases it was a fixed string, but in some cases it needed a special code, which had to be placed somewhere in the string. And that location was just marked by %s, and the whole thing passed to sprintf, and then it would expand the %s, and everything worked. Except most of the time, that code argument wasn't actually used because the template was just a fixed string. So now we got warnings for that. And I rewrote those 2 ad hoc cases to use the substitute operator and just replace %s manually. And it also found one test. I said it affected 2 modules. One of those modules didn't used to do that. It just returned the template in the code separately, and every caller had to expand that themselves. And then it got cleaned up, and all that code got moved into the module. The calling code got cleaner, but the test wasn't updated for that. So the test was still trying to expand that template that was already expanded, which no one had noticed. Perl did, so I was able to just delete 4 lines from the test, and fixed it. And this gets a check mark from me because this is actually a real issue. It didn't break anything, but it wasn't quite right. The test wasn't updated for the new code in the module. So a real issue found. This is also fun. This is a test that makes sure that the total computed is the correct value, which is computed as 4 times 10 plus 2, and is correctly formatted with 2 decimal places. And the name of the test is card has correct total price. The issue with that is that sprintf is a list operator and grabs all the remaining arguments, including that description string. Yeah, so this is also a bug in the test because the test doesn't have a name. This was 4 test files with several individual cases in there. Also easy to fix once you know it's there. This was super fun. Error message, use of uninitialized value $2 in concatenation or string. That's not a new warning message. The code in question was this regex replacement operation. The original intent behind it was apparently an external tool that couldn't cope with technically legal XML, and it had to be specially formatted with line breaks after the XML version declaration. So there was this code in there that tried to make sure that the XML conformed to that format. Now it's trying to match the XML version tag at the beginning of the string, and then it has the $sign at the end, and the M flag, which means match at embedded new lines. And then it's replaced by $1 and $2 and a new line. So it's trying to add a new line somewhere. The problem is there's only 1 pair of parentheses in the regex, so only $1 gets set. So if that thing matches, you're guaranteed that $2 is undef at that point, and it should warn. So the warning is correct. Why didn't it warn before on 5.12? That's because there was a bug in the regex optimizer, which somehow deduced that, I think it got confused about the $sign. It thought that any string longer than, I don't know, 17 characters or what that is, could never possibly match. So it simply skipped that part. It never actually matched, so we never got the warning. The fix was to simply delete that line because apparently it never did anything. So that was one module. Then we have a useless use of \e, also nice. This regex author is some kind of form field that got in, and the input could contain the string not specified, and we wanted that to turn into the empty string, to be actually empty. So we have this regex matching beginning of string, then the text not specified, then end of string, and then replace that by nothing. Problem here is someone swapped the Q and E, so the first \e did nothing, and then the \q at the end quoted, that is escaped, the space and the \z and the space at the end. So this also never quite worked correctly, and apparently there was no unit test for it. So yeah, fix is just writing it the right way around. Also, very nice warning. Assuming not a POSIX class since there is no terminating colon in regex. We had this regex that was trying to sanitize a file name. It was trying to match everything that is not an alphanumeric character or a dot and replace that by an underscore. So safe characters are the dot and alphanumerics. And someone had swapped the closing brace and the dot. So it was actually misparsed as, I think, some kind of character class matching everything that is not a colon or A or L and N or U or M, and after it a closing bracket, which never actually happened. And so this was also doing nothing effectively. It wasn't a critical bug because this wasn't actually for input processing, but for output. We were generating these file names. So it wasn't a security issue, but it was still annoying. And I fixed the regex and broke some tests because the tests were relying on the old behavior. So that code got rewritten completely and replaced by something saner, but yeah, real bug found by a improved regex warning. Then we have control flow, possible precedence issue with control flow operator. We had this kind of code, return foo or bar, and the problem with that is OR has very low precedence. So return foo is the left operand of the OR operator, and bar is the right operand, so it's trying to check the return value of return foo, which makes no sense because return has no value, it simply goes away. That is, it parses as if it had parentheses around the whole left part. And the correct fix is, well, either to add parentheses after the return or to just change to the symbolic operator with the two pipes, which passes correctly. This is probably my favorite new warning in Perl because it only seems to find real issues. There are no false positives and it's always a bug. And yeah, we had that kind of code in 2 modules and 1 test. Except the test was also a module, but it was only a test module. The big one, hash randomization. I'll start with the fun one. We had a test that would start randomly failing. The test was for geocoding, and what it did was it had a collection of postal address specifications in the form of hashrefs, which it would pass in and make sure that it got the right latitude and longitude out. And it would do each item twice to test the caching layer. We had a caching layer in there, and it made sure that the second time it got the same result as the first time, and it hooked into LWP to make sure no HTTP request was actually made the second time. So it verified that it all came from the cache. And that randomly started failing both tests because, yeah, it was an HTTP request was made, and it wasn't the same result as the first one because it wasn't returning a 200 OK, but a 200 something unchanged or something like that. And that turned out to be the cause of, caused by this code, because the input value is a hash reference, possibly nested. Addresses can have some interesting formats, and it has to be turned into a string, into a hash key. And the code used to do that is this. It just calls toJSON from the JSON module to get a string. And toJSON produces the string in internal hash order. And yeah, that changes quite a bit in newer Perls because you get a new random hash seed each start. So the fix is to enable the canonical flag in the JSON encoder so you get the same string each time. Canonical sorts the hash keys. I don't know if it does anything else, but that's what it's intended for. If the input is the same, you get if the input is equivalent, you get the exact same string out. And that was one module. And a real bug, because while not as frequent, this could have happened in 5.12 too. And the other things are a really crazy one. We had a report that was generated with the columns in hash order. It just threw everything into a hash and then for each key and then add that. And there was a unit test to make sure that this accidental field order was maintained. And the fix was kind of ugly. I had to add an artificial sort key to replicate the accidental hash order from 5.12. Not beautiful code, but it works. In 3 modules, I just turned keys of hash into sort keys of hash. I think it never was technically required, but it made testing much easier. And in one case, it was about sending emails. There were some emails that had to be sent out, and the testing framework didn't make it easy to receive and test them in arbitrary order. It wanted a fixed order to run each test in, so I just sorted them, and yeah, that fixed it. And there were some other issues in there, but a very common kind of fix in there was that the code before used EQ or diff, which does a deep comparison of 2 data structures, and if they don't match, it basically does a data dumper on them, and then outputs a diff, so you can see what's different on each side. And my new favorite test module is test deep, which exports a compare deeply function, which you call with the value you want to test, and a specification. And the specification can be a normal Perl data structure, in which case it just does a deep comparison. But it can also include some special values generated by some helper functions such as bag or superhash of or regex. And then it will do something fancier. For example, you can say, I don't know what exact string I'm expecting here, but it has to match this regex. Or I want to make sure I'm getting a hash here, and it has to have these keys with these values, but anything else I don't care about. That would be superhash of. And in this case, I'm using bag, which tells it these are the exact values I want, but I don't care about the order. There's also set, which also doesn't care about the order, but which also ignores duplicates. In this case, I want to check for duplicates, I just don't care about the order. So bag got used pretty often. Mm-hmm. And the bad news are, leave me alone, you insect. There are unfixed issues. There's a really crazy one. There's a test that goes through some kind of workflow. It sends some GET requests, POST requests to forms, steps through the thing, and at one point it expects to get a 302 redirect, and what it gets instead is a 200 OK. And I know it's related to hashes because if I set it's down here, the Perl hash seed environment variable, if I set that to 0 and disable hash randomization, it works. So there's a bug somewhere in there, and I have no idea where, because it's really annoying to debug something if the error condition is 200 OK instead of an exception or a stack trace or something nice. Yeah, I tried to... Yeah?
What module was doing the 302 versus 200?
That's our code, the web application. And I'm not sure at which point the bug occurs. I tried to trace into it with devel trace, but that generates huge amounts of output. And I could see, okay, this part is different from this one, but they turned out to be, okay, it's just iterating over a hash, and it's processing the same elements in different order, so I can't mechanically diff them. And then at some point down into the hundreds of megabytes of trace, it starts diverging, but I have no idea why or where. Yeah, that's going to be fun. And another issue is that we have some nested hash structure, and it gets completely mangled. Like values from some key suddenly appear under another key and others are gone completely. And I'm pretty sure that's related to the perturb keys thing. A note about that, you can read the details in perl.perl run. In addition to the hash seed stuff, there's the perturb keys setting, which means that every time you insert a new key into the hash, it sort of reshuffles itself, in addition to the hash seed stuff. And disabling that seems to fix that issue, which is also non-deterministic. So I think something is iterating over there and inserting new keys and then getting the same key again or something. Yeah, this is just generally helpful stuff. These environment variables you can set to at least confirm that this is where your bug is coming from, or where the difference in behavior is coming from. But yeah, I expect, especially the first one, is going to take me some time to drill down and get at the root of. And note about performance, I didn't really test performance. I was still trying to get all the tests to go green. And I only did a single, very unscientific test, which is manually reloading a page in the browser and looking at the network tab to see how long it takes. And this page took originally about 7 seconds to render, which is too much. We're still trying to optimize that, but it made for a nice benchmark. And what I remember from the flame graph from profiling is that it was a lot of recursive function calls in there. And in that single test, 524 was consistently about 12% faster than 512, which is extremely nice because, yeah, your whole code gets faster by just upgrading Perl and doing nothing, no changes in the code. Let me check the time. Wow, yeah. I'm going faster than expected, so let me see. I'm going to go back to the slides that I skipped first. Yeah, there were issues like modules not compiling anymore, like list more utils. I found a bug ticket about that, which had already been fixed, so just upgrading the module fixed everything. But for bonus irony, that original bug report was submitted by myself 2 years earlier. I just didn't remember. Padwalker. I don't remember what exactly the problem was there. It still builds and passes its tests, but I think at runtime there were some assertions failing. And we don't use Padwalker directly, but it's required by devel caller, which is used by moosex params validate, which is used by file change notify, which is pulled in by catalyst devel. There are some weird dependency chains in there. But again, upgrade fixed it. Archive extract is a fun case because there, it turned out it was in the requirements, but missing from the CPAN file snapshot. Carton hadn't recorded it, which is because it used to be in core, and apparently core modules don't get recorded in there. And I don't know if it's a design issue in Carton or if we're just using Carton wrong, and I didn't really check. My fix was to just bump the minimum required version to something newer than was released with any Perl. So Carton was forced to pull it from CPAN, and yeah, then everything worked. And archive extract is used for some reason by alien tidyp, which is a dependency of HTML tidy, which we're using in tests. CGI, our old friend. Yeah, same issue basically, and it's amazing how often CGI appears in the dependency lists of modules. It's required by devel cover, by HTTP server simple, which is required by www mechanize. It's pulled in by test mock object and by universal ISA. I have no idea why, but it's there.
Yeah, we found that by accident, due to Gen 2-like power system trivia, that to build a module on a system, we did this test, whatever, test mock object installed, new version of CPI PM as a bonus, and we are still using deprecated now remove functions and all, and things broke. So yeah, we learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
It is a surprise, beware of that.
And same issue, module pluggable, which is used by ourselves and the Catalyst runtime and all over the place. Really common. Yeah, Alias had some warnings that got fixed. PDF reuse had the defined array issue, which was fixed, but I think the code that uses PDF reuse is actually dead in our code base, so maybe that will just get dropped completely. Locales, also warnings. This one actually required some follow-up work because the interface kind of changed in 0.3. It started returning additional values from get territory codes or something like that, numeric codes in addition to the 2-letter codes that we were expecting. Badger debug. is fun because there's no update available. It throws warnings, and the last batch release it was in 2012, so we just pulled that into our repository and patched it locally. And that one is required by HTML query, which is used by CSS inliner, which we are using. Kind of sucks. butils, not a new warning, but subroutine b op parent redefined, which gets ultimately pulled in by dbix class fixtures, but it has also a fix in the newer version, so just upgrade that. Yuri has this warning, and I think there were originally some issues with test LWP user agent. I don't remember the details, but upgrading Yuri fixed that. And then I upgraded data dumper and didn't take notes on why, and test exception. And I also removed some modules. This one is also fun. Method inliner had this warning: unescaped left brace and regex deprecated, pass through, etc., which is normal. Except I had never heard of method inliner, so I checked, where are we using this? Turns out nowhere. Okay, maybe some CPAN module is pulling it in indirectly. No, nothing is using this. So how exactly am I seeing this warning if no one is using this module? Turns out we had a slightly over-aggressive preloader that just recursively went through and loaded all possible modules to make sure, yeah, it's all preloaded and all the worker children have everything available. Okay, so if nothing is actually using this, how did it land in this directory? How did it get installed? As it turns out, this module was part of Mu. It wasn't supposed to be, nothing in Mu uses it, but it had just been living in there, unnoticed by anyone. And I reported that as a bug and said, yeah, you should probably escape your braces or remove that module from the distribution. And they said, oh yeah, I don't think that should be here, and it's now gone from Mu. So this is also fun, finding accidental cruft in other modules. And the other one was bizarre, that was Mu's autobox. Autobox lets you call methods on non-objects, on unblessed references. And we had one call to this in our code base, and it should have worked, and it did in 5.12. It had a reference, an array reference was calling flatten on it, and that just the autoboxing stopped working, and we got the error. And I didn't take the time to find out why, because as it turned out, there was a comment in that line that apparently somehow this flatten call doesn't work on some developer machines. This comment was, I don't know how many years old. And there was a check in there. Apparently this call was silently failing. What it was trying to do was check if it's a simple scalar, call flatten on it, which does nothing, just returns the value. If it's an array ref, dereference that and return those values. And then there was a check afterwards. If we still have only one value and it's an array ref, just dereference it manually and do that. So the flatten call was completely pointless because we already had the replacement code in there. So I ripped that out and simplified the remaining code, and now it's much better. And then it turned out the module was still pulled in by MooseX abstract factory, so which we also used only in one place. So I rewrote that. It grew from 2 lines to like 12 lines. But in exchange, I was able to remove another 7-line module or so, some kind of role. So that was worth it. We just completely dropped that dependency on Moose Autobox and Autobox. And the use in MooseX Abstract Factory is also funny. It only uses it to call a map method on an array reference 2 times. The first one is in void context, so can just be replaced by a for each loop. And the second one isn't, but can be replaced by the built-in map, which makes the code shorter, in my opinion, easier to read, and also more efficient, especially the for each part. I don't know why MooseX Abstract Factory uses autoboxing for that, but yeah, it's in there. And I thought I had reported this as a bug, as a wish list item, remove that dependency, but now I can't find any trace of it, and I may have to actually send that email. And we were there. And the final notes are, this experiment was completely worth it. We found and fixed 12 actual issues in our code just because of the improved warnings in Perl. And yeah, partially, some of those issues were just in the test suite, but we also found real production issues. This is great. The potential performance boost is enticing. We really want that. And hash randomization bugs can be very hard to track down. There are many that are very easy to see. It's all very obvious what's going wrong, but some are really deep. So thank you for your attention. I hope this was useful or at least entertaining to you.